Hello and welcome to Martinis Eco and Country Bites. My name is Martine and I am here today with a wonderful guest all the way from the United States of America, a woman who became infamous and quite someone who inspired so many worldwide for a video appearance that she had just on national TV where she was and state TV, but then it became a viral sensation. Wasn't a sensation as far as what the issue was talking about, which was about offshore wind turbines and the destruction that's been going on in the US. I'm just going to play the quick clip and
the beaches because they don't want people getting impaled by shards of fiberglass.
Pieces of broken wind turbine in the water and on the beach. Nantucket's harbor master shutting down all south-facing beaches.
Each one of these blades is longer than a football field. And if they are snapping in half and sending shards of debris in all directions, that is extremely unsafe. People should really start asking themselves, what if there's a hurricane? What happens then? Do many blades break? What happens? And who's responsible for that? There are multiple projects planned of hundreds of turbines combined. Hundreds of turbines. There's probably going to be like 1,000 turbines in that block with blades longer than a football field. They have closed the beaches.
I'd like to welcome onto Martini's Eco and Country Bites the amazing Megan Lapp from the US. Hello, Megan, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Wow, there are two incredible blonde women with pink t-shirts on that impress me on all kinds of levels. That would be Alex Nicol here in Australia, who was a whistleblower for the wind turbine industry. And then there's yourself, who, when you made that video, I was like, wow, it's like you look a little bit alike. And it was like you're like from alternate universes. You're just doing the same work on different sides of the planet. So welcome, and I'm so grateful that you could join me tonight to speak your story and tell us about just how hard things have been in the US.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a privilege to be on. This is cool. I've never been on, any media in Australia before, so this is awesome. It's been very rough in the US. We have multiple projects under construction on our commercial fishing grounds. I'm in commercial fisheries. I represent a company. We own 5 commercial fishing vessels, and these projects were sited on our fishing grounds. We will not be able to fish there. Let's see, there's 1 project in, there's 2 under construction. 1 was starting that the Trump administration just pulled the plug on. Another one that's getting ready to start. And, I talk to fishermen who have been, they're generational families, fishing families that have fished in an area for hundreds of years, and they come back to me and they say, I made my last tow in that area. That's it. They just put a turbine there. I've like lost it forever, and you're watching this before your eyes, and it's not okay. So I've been fighting this as hard as I possibly can for the last number of years. And now with Vineyard Wind, like in that video, Vineyard Wind has the majority of their bases in. They have some towers, they have some blades. And then that blade snapped in July. It took them 2 days before they alerted the town of Nantucket. Meanwhile, these giant pieces of fiberglass were washing up in the surf. A lot of people surf there. And people could have gotten killed because they didn't tell anybody. I think they were hoping that the pieces would go out to sea and, maybe we would hit them. But they didn't. They went towards land, and it caused a major problem. The debris was on beaches from Massachusetts to Rhode Island to New York. It just spread a big debris field, and who knows where other parts of it went. It took them months and months and months to remove the piece of the turbine. They supposedly removed it not that long ago, but I'm not sure. I haven't had a boat out there to look. But through this, we found out, number one, blade failure is a common thing. Very common, so I believe, I did the math, and for like 3,000 turbines on the East Coast of the United States, you'd expect something like, I can't remember the exact number, but it was about 28 or 30 a year to break. Imagine that happening every year. And we have hurricanes. Like, those are not good, right? So rip these things to pieces. That would happen. You've already had this one that's broken with no wind, no, nothing. And then during all of this, we found out that the blade factory in Canada that was making them, there was this big expose where the workers were basically told, get the stuff out the door, falsify the safety quality control sheets, and just get production going. So then there was a review of all of the blades that had been put up at the time. And they have to remove the blades from 22 turbines. That's 66 blades. They got to take down now because they were all faulty. And then, take them to a facility to fix them and bring them back. Now, have they done that review on the project off of Virginia that's going in? Have they done that review on the project off of Rhode Island that's going in? Have they done, and because this apparently is something that happens because they just want to get production out. And, you have a weather, right? You have a weather window where you can get it in, and they just want everything fast tracked because here, at least, I don't know what the rules are there. You're on a clock to get the subsidies from the federal government. So you have to have a certain percentage of whatever done by a certain time. So it's like, hey, get it out, because they don't care once it's done. Then they'll sell the thing. They'll sell the project. They'll divest themselves. They'll sell it to a, utility company or whatever, and then move on to the next one. Because what they really have is a Ponzi scheme. They have to continually be getting subsidies because that's the money. That's where the money is. You build, you get the subsidy. Sell that one off. Build, get the subsidy. Sell that one off. So it's getting real. And unlike in the North Sea, where they have a lot of the, wind farms now, on the East Coast of the United States, we're probably much more similar to Australia in that we have a beach tourism economy, big beach tourism economy. People are swimming, people are sailing, people have recreational vessels that are, you don't have that in the North Sea, like it's cold and rainy. And so now the implications of that for an economy like ours and like yours is tremendous. So a lot of coastal communities have woken up and they're like, we don't want these things. What the heck?
So Megan, your background is basically a regulation compliance officer, basically is the role that you do. So you know this stuff inside and out. And this is where I challenge people, and it's like, they say, oh, but what would you do about it? It's like when you've read a lot about different acts and regulations and stuff, you kind of start to get your head around this. This does make the brain absolutely boggle, because how is it that an industry that is self-regulating, that's what's happening there, and it's what's happening in Australia, they can just do whatever they want. They can make the rules up as they go, it seems. So with that, how is it that it has been allowed? This was under the Biden administration that this was pushed through, but this goes way back further, that you were mentioning also. It was in the Obama administration that this all got implemented, right? So signing up for the Paris Accord, the Goa Agreement, the same as Australia. Yeah.
Yeah. And what they did, so it's interesting because I like to make the comparisons between oil and gas and wind, because we've had offshore energy development for many years in the form of oil and gas, right? So you'd think that the regulations would be like somewhat similar, but they're not. And so, you see the favoritism. So what here in the United States, what they do for oil and gas development is they have like a 5-year plan that they call it. And they start with a big area, and then they kind of like deconflict and get down to a smaller area. And that's where they cite the leases. Well, with offshore wind during the Obama administration, they did this thing called Smart from the Start, where they didn't want to do the analysis up front because that would cost time. And they wanted to make it fast so that they didn't want to take the time to do that analysis. So they just threw leases out there and they said, well, we'll do the analysis later. So fast forward, now you have these leases. They're sited on top of fishing grounds. They're sited. There's one lease, the one that the Trump administration just killed, that's sited on a Department of Homeland Security weapons training area. And the other part of the government knew about this, but like just didn't care, because they're like, well, I'll do the analysis later. But then like later, of course, when they're like, oh, they've done all this investment. And by that point, the developers have made a power purchase agreement with some state utility to sell the power. So the only thing that the government can approve in order to allow that contract to be fulfilled, which is speculative, and like who does that, is to approve the entire project, because their entire project is built around how much power can I get and that power purchase agreement. So I tell people all the time, so the government never actually did an analysis. They never really did a true environmental analysis. They never deconflicted with any existing uses in the ocean, because everything was designed to be fast-tracked. And then by the time the analysis happened, the federal government became a third party to a private contract and said, we have to make sure that power purchase agreement can be filled. It's like, Well, why? Like, and I tell people all the time, like, if you wanted to build a shed in your backyard, right? And you had to get planning permission from the town to do it. You wouldn't go build it and then get the permit. And you know what I mean? You would go get the permit first, because if you want to build a 10 by 12 shed, but then the town says, well, no, you can only build it 5 by 8. Now you have to tear it down and build again. And you know what? If that's the case, too bad, because you were an idiot and you didn't wait till you got the permits to find out. But that's exactly what's happening with wind. They make these contracts and they say, well, we're going to do this. And then by the time the permitting happens, like, it's too late. Now what the government has done here is abdicate their position of authority and just say, well, we have to meet the power purchase agreement. It's like, no, your job is actually to follow the law. There's law here that you have to follow. And if you have to say, sorry, you can't build a project, well, then too bad. Sorry, you can't build the project. You did all the speculative stuff first, and that's on you. It's a risk you take. It's business, right? Business is risk.
This is copy paste here in Australia, exactly what you're talking about, because there was no consultation with community. There was no consultation with the existing authorities that were in place to put in an overarching sort of like precautionary principle. Yeah, this is what we should have had, this precautionary principle where we're making sure that the EPA, all of these other assessments are looked at, that existing stakeholders like the fishermen, like other organizations, the community, were all consulted with this. So it seems like there was no consultation done, just like in Australia. It was a box ticking event for us. On the East Coast, they didn't have any consultation whatsoever. They just announced the zone, whereas over here, they put on some events. We turned up and gave out the real facts and concerns, and let's just say that started a bit of a shitstorm, as we'd call it, here in Australia. And it was great because we were able to raise from day one what the major concerns was, because when we went and researched and we looked at not only what we'd seen in the US and overseas, and experts in the field had already said these are like well-known, well-documented science-based issues here.
Right.
And so there was so much data to already go off to say there are major concerns here, but nothing was listened to. After the blade breakage, and it took months to clean up, Megan, what was the impact that you saw for the communities just for that? Because we're talking about where I live here in Geograph Bay. This is a tourist mecca of the whole state. There is literally a stretch that goes from here the whole way to the city, which is Perth. It's the capital of our state. And the entire zone all along here is at risk from offshore wind. Not only that, but we have limestone reef systems that they need to carve through that people do not have any comprehension. They're like, no, they're not. They're just going to lay the cables. It's like, no, they can't, because there's mitigation that's required to reduce the EMF in the water substrate. And so people have been not given one single truthful information from our federal government, our state government. Mainstream media have blacklisted us from even trying to speak the truth and raise these serious concerns, because when you're carving through thousands of kilometers, that's what it would be for us, thousands of kilometers of substrate to bury that. This is prime rock lobster industry, where we do a huge exportation to Asia in particular, but other places in the world, that we have some of the most rare and endemic species in the world here, because we're the most southern temperate coral reef system in the world. Right. And yet it's all completely just like ignored. Yep. Also, we're a birthing zone for the southern right whale and the humpback whale. They birth right out here on our doorstep. And the whole thing is completely disregarded, which goes against all international laws. What has been the same thing there as a response to the violation of your own federal laws, as well as these international treaties that were signed, Megan? What is happening with the communities there? I just find that the outrage is heard by Doug Burgum, who obviously is the congressman in New York that has halted the New York development. Yep. However, it seems that Massachusetts is still going forward. What's happening with that? Why?
Yeah, so a few different things. It is very, very similar to here. Um, basically every environmental law has been thrown out the window. Like I'm in commercial fishing. Like if you were to like write all of the rules, it would be, it would be a stack of papers floor to ceiling. And right now they are pile driving in a habitat area of particular concern on a glacial moraine. They're building and they've plowed about 3,000 boulders out of the way with a boulder plow that like if we touched that with fishing gear, like I mean, all hell would break loose, right? But here we are. And so they've gotten away with murder. The communities after the blade break, communities I think really even woke up anymore. And I will say Massachusetts is a tough place because your state government is completely against you and you have no help, and none of the congressmen there are helpful. Where really has been ground zero for opposition here has been New Jersey. New Jersey has screamed and fought, and their tourist communities have fought. They have like massive, towns, counties sued the federal government over offshore wind because they were just getting run over, and they have congressmen. As well as Maryland. Maryland also has a coastal congressman and a coastal city there that's based on beach tourism, and they have really gone to bat as well. They've filed lawsuits. They're fighting. Their congressmen are fighting at the federal level, and so that has been incredibly helpful in raising these issues with the Trump administration as well. But as far as what happened prior, you're absolutely right. Like I said earlier, the federal government here became third party to a private contract. They were pushing for this. It wasn't even like, well, the line is blurred between the offshore wind industry and the government. Like there was no line, right? It was full regulatory capture. That's what was happening. And so what we did have interagency consultations, but every time a different agency would raise concerns, whether it was the Coast Guard, whether it was National Marine Fisheries Service, whether it was the U.S. Navy, whether it was the Department of Homeland Security, whatever it was, BOEM, which is the agency that oversees offshore wind development, they were like, oh well. And they would go forward. And all these other agencies would say, well, we can only have interagency consultation. BOEM's the lead on development. And I'm going like, whoa. Now, for certain things I can, I could see that being the case. But I'm like, the Navy, the Department of Homeland Security, like, wake up, people, right? So, for example, in the project, so last week, no, it wasn't last week, it was the week before, I gave a presentation to the Maritime Law Association of the United States. And my presentation was right after this guy who works for American Clean Power, the windmill people, right? Like a lobbying organization. And he was saying, oh, there was so much analysis on that New York project that the Trump administration just paused. And he was like, I don't know what the problem was. And I'm like, oh, well, I've been doing this since 2015. And actually, I know the answer to that. You had, before it was ever leased, you had Department of Homeland Security and Coast Guard saying it was a weapons training area. Kind of like saying, hey, could you maybe recite this? The Coast Guard said it's in the middle of traffic lanes into New York Harbor. They're very busy. And the Coast Guard said, you need to have all these setbacks. And BOEM was like, nah. Then you had NOAA's Ocean Service saying all these radars, HF radars that they use for search and rescue for the Coast Guard and for oil spill response, were going to be impacted and you were going to lose all of this. And they were like, nah, we don't care. Then and this is all before it was leased. Before it was leased, then you had National Marine Fisheries Service say, this is a major fishing ground. You should consider reciting the lease area because this is like not a good place. And all of that came with, well, the government said, nah, we don't care. And they cited it because they wanted it to be done. So fast forward, when the analysis came, they just said, well, we'll do some mitigation. We don't really have legal authority to do mitigation, but we will, and say everything is fine. And then the developer at one point during the environmental analysis, they hadn't finished all of their environmental or their like shallow hazard seismic work yet. And then they found that there's this stuff called glauconite in the lease area, which means you can't pile drive. It's like a sediment that you can't pile drive in. So then they said in a public comment, they were like, well, we actually need to reconfigure everything. And we can only do this because it's the only way that we can meet our power purchase agreement. And so then the government was like, oh, well, then we'll just approve that because you have to meet your power purchase agreement. So like literally everything was thrown out the window, like major concerns that nobody cared. And then later on, actually, it was before they approved it. So radar is interfered with by windmills. Right? Whether it's marine radar, air defense radar, defend,
Yeah.
all of this. And that project was going to interfere with the entire line of sight of JFK Airport's air surveillance radar, like JFK into New York City. It's like one of the busiest airports in the country. And I'm always kind of like, does anybody remember 9/11? Remember when that happened? That radar was tracking planes. So you're going to say, well, we can knock that out or compromise it, because analysis showed, they said, targets can hide to wind farm and you won't be able to see them, like enemy targets. So you look at like the entirety of the whole thing and you go like, on what planet is this okay?
Mm-hmm.
Like, please explain to me, like I'm 5. Like, what planet is this okay on? But they approved everything because obviously, as is the case there, it's a political agenda. Facts don't matter. It's politics and it's money. But facts matter in court.
Mm-hmm.
So that really, that was our course of action. My company sued on one of them. Now we lost, but there was good outcome of it in the sense of a new federal memo came out, legal memo, using both of my court cases as rationale, partial rationale for interpreting the law, and now saying, look, if you're going to do offshore wind, you have to avoid fisheries. You can't put them on fishing grounds. Basically, you have to prevent.
Bravo.
The law says you have to prevent interference with reasonable uses of the ocean. And they didn't do that. So all of these things now can play in, and hopefully now in the next 4 years, we get some traction and we shut this stuff down.
Okay. I'm going to quickly show those people that may not have seen this. So this is Doug Burgum here when he announced back in April that the New York offshore wind was being halted because they need to do greater discovery and look into all the overlooking or undersights of all the issues that were never addressed. And this is, kudos to Doug. All I can say is like to make that happen. Now, this is the Trump memorandum. So, in Australia, people it's very divisive. You only have to say the word Trump and you're either going to trigger people or they're going to love him. As far as I'm concerned, anyone who does idealizing anyone these days really hasn't been paying attention to what's really going on globally and planet-wide. But as far as I'm concerned, the executive orders that he's done and the memorandums have a lot to speak to, because under the Biden administration, they put through a memorandum 37067. And that is a conflict against the Outer Continental Shelf Land Act. And then now, after all of this, with the help of what you've done, so I'm lost for words, Megan, for the fact that you have the knowledge and how to apply it and taking this to court. Like you said, you might not have had the win that you thought, but you did. You shifted the parameters of where they needed to shift things up to keep themselves within the boundaries of the law. And in response to that, Trump has now redacted or canceled the Biden administration's memorandum that was a total conflict about what you've just said. And he's reinstated his memorandum 37059 that he put through in 2020, which means that essentially at the strike of a pen, he can now go, you're in conflict with the Outer Continental Shelf Act for all offshore wind, and can cancel the whole lot because of what you just talked about.
Right. And so the first day one, we had an executive order saying that there was going to be a review of all of the issued leases, right? To basically, and it kind of said in there, to basically see if they were leased legally or not, and see if it's necessary to terminate the leases. And they were leased illegally because they never prevented interference with reasonable uses of the ocean, which is us, and shipping or anything else that's a reasonable use of the ocean, right? They never deconflicted. And there's at no point in their process where they can or do deconflict. So they'll just say, we'll throw some mitigation out there. It's like, no, that's not how this law reads, So now there is a legal basis for rescinding all of these leases. And you know, and as far as, like you said, you know, people either hate him or love him. That's just how it is with Donald Trump. But I'll tell you this, Donald Trump can't be bought because he's already got his own money. He doesn't need anybody else's money. A lot of these other politicians, they were getting rich off of this, right? They do backdoor deals and then they go lobby for whoever. And, you know, a lot of money flies around. But Donald Trump doesn't need their money. So he doesn't care. And he doesn't care who he offends because he doesn't need a job afterwards. He's got like a real estate empire. So it's not like he needs the money. And so I guarantee you there was a lot of changing of hands of money throughout this entire process. And now we finally have somebody who is objective because he doesn't need it. And that, and thank God, because if it wasn't for Donald Trump, we, you know, you would not, I tell people all the time, you wouldn't have commercial fisheries on the East Coast of the United States in 20 years. It would be done if they built everything that they wanted to do. So, you know, it's been a lifesaver for us. And, you know, realistically, that's how this goes. And if, you know, either you elect good politicians or you're going to have lawsuits. And, you know, and the lawsuits may work and they may not work. Depends, right? It depends what judge you get. But if Australia's situation is anything like here, you know, they ignore the law, they do what they want. And, you know, you were saying about them speeding everything up, which is what they did here. You know what? When you go too fast, you make mistakes. And that's how you lose. So you have that working for you.
Megan, I just want to come back to what we were talking about just before. Oh my gosh, it's just popped out of my mind. But you mentioned something about, as far as like, for me, it's like proof is in the pudding. It's like someone can talk the talk and make a whole bunch of promises, but when they put things into action and they have tangible outcomes, for me, that's all, honestly, that's all I care about when it comes to people who are supposed to be representatives of the people. So we just had our election and it was a lose-lose for Australia when it comes to onshore and offshore wind, because in our state, we both got what would be equivalent to Democrats, both came into power. So we had a state election, which is still under investigation because they had an international organization be in charge of our election, which is basically foreign interference. It's like, this is crazy. Yeah, so that's being currently investigated, our state election. Our federal election, that was dubious as well, because the election outcome was announced before even they had even started counting a lot of the votes in our state in Western Australia and other states as well.
Wow.
Please explain. So there are a lot of things here that are making a lot of questions, where I think that the same parties that were playing these games in the US are kind of playing the same in Australia. So my thing is that we have been meeting our group in Western Australia. There's two of us here. That's Save Our Beloved Geograph Bay and Keep Kalbarri Beautiful, have been consulting with community for 15 months for Save Our Beloved Geograph Bay and a little bit longer for Keep Kalbarri Beautiful. So we have been trying to educate the community. Megan, I would like you to maybe address all of these coastal communities in Western Australia and on the East Coast of Australia, to get them to comprehend the kind of battle they will be looking at if they don't get up now and start pushing back. Because I have tried to get through to people that once this ball gets rolling and the pile driving ships start coming on to our waters, there won't be kind of stopping this until it comes to a head in a catastrophic way, like failure of blades. There's some other kind of pollution issue that we're starting to have failure of recruitment of different species in the area because they're so displaced or they're so disturbed by what's going on, that only then, when we've gone too far, will people get off their butts and do something. So maybe you could share some pearls of wisdom to the community, the coastal communities, this particular fishermen. We have the WA rock lobster industry. We have an octopus industry. We have the wetliners. We have like we don't have that many trawlers down this way, but we still have them in Australia. What would you say to them right now?
You better get up and fight with every ounce of strength that you have and not stop. It will cost you time. It is going to cost you your personal time. It is going to cost you your personal money. It is going to cost you sleepless nights. It is going to cost you a lot of work, blood, sweat, and tears. But if you don't do it, you lose this area and you lose it forever. And I don't think most people really comprehend that, like you said, until they see something. Like there's people on Martha's Vineyard, which can now see that broken blade and those turbines. There are billionaires with a B selling their houses as quick as they can because they didn't think that they would see it. And now they're like, we don't want to look at that. And they're leaving, right? You have coastal communities, you have businesses that rely on the tourism industry, right? Like imagine your beaches being closed for months at a time because of debris and because of this and that and the other thing. Imagine all of the things that you love about the place where you live. You know, you have your fishing industry and you have that fresh seafood in that community that's there. You have the tourism industry, you have the jobs that provides, you have the beautiful views and the nature that you're surrounded with, that's the reason why you live where you live. And imagine losing that. And once you lose it, like it's too late, right? So if you're going to fight for it, you have to fight for it now. And it sounds like you're in a tough spot, which, you know, we were into. Like I said, it's going to cost you. You have to consider the cost. Like it's going to, you know, the fight's not going to come for free. It's going to take a lot of work and it's going to take your personal time and it's going to take your energy and it's going to take your focus and finances and all kinds of things. But what are you willing to fight for? Are you willing to fight for your home? You know, this is your home. Are you going to fight for it? Are you going to defend it? And, you know, if you're in the situation where you are facing, you know, the equivalent of, you know, the Biden administration, it's going to look like you're going to lose. And there will be a time probably when it's going to look like you're losing. But there's only one way you win. And that is you refuse to lose. And when they come at you, you come again. And when they come at you again, you come again. And you keep coming. And people used to tell me all the time, well, like in the way that you're going to lose, they used to say, well, this is a David and Goliath battle. And I was like, yeah, but who won? Who won that? It was the kid with the slingshot. It wasn't the giant with the sword, right? Yeah. But you have to be willing. You have to be willing to be the guy with the slingshot and who's not going to back down. And so I would really encourage people, think about, what do you value? Do you value the place where you live? Will you defend your home? Because it's a war. It's a war, you know, not with weapons, but, you know, with information, with political pressure, with lawsuits, with all that kind of stuff. And it takes a lot, you know, and I respect people. I respect people that take their, you know, their personal time to fight the fight. But again, like imagine losing what you have. Do you want to lose that?
Yeah. And the thing is, it's compounded for us even more so because not only is most of the WA coastline, there's 6 different zones and it stretches an enormous area. And every single area they've selected has incredible importance for the fishing industry and tourism. Some of them are the most pristine beaches and oceans in the world. And people are like, oh, it's not pristine. I'm like, have you been traveling in the world? Have you seen the damage in other nations?
Yeah.
It's like, no. And people don't even know what's under the water here. They don't understand how the diversity and the expansiveness of the reef system that's out there. They have no concept of it. And because it's been silenced, most people think still, because mainstream media said that so many proponents pulled out. So they thought that the offshore wind turbine industry had been taken out of our oceans, that had been cancelled. I'm like, no, we still have 4 proponents with feasibility license applications in. And they're like, I didn't know that. I'm like, okay, so this is where we're up against this propaganda machine.
Yep. Totally.
And the thing is that, Megan, it actually breaks my heart. I got very emotional before while you were talking. I love this state so much.
Yeah. And you're being invaded. That's what I tell people. I'm like, all these companies, the ones that have come here, they're owned by the Norwegian government. They're owned by the Danish government. They're owned by, foreign governments. And they're coming in and they're taking our ocean. And I'm like, are you going to stand for that? Foreigners coming to take what's yours? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And for the fishing industry, fishing is it's not a job, it's a lifestyle, it's a culture, it's something that's more than that, and I would always ask people, they say that the projects will last 25, 30 years, which they won't because they corrode, but whatever, just pretend. I'm like, are you going to take away a sustainable food source from people who have fed you for hundreds of years and can feed you for hundreds of more for a 25-year project? Like, that doesn't add up. It doesn't add up. And once you do the damage, it's done. Like, I mean, if you have like those reef systems and that limestone and all that stuff that supports life, when you destroy that, you don't get it back. Like, look at Manhattan. Manhattan used to be beautiful. It used to be forests and it used to be farms and there was like orchards and there was all this stuff. And now look at it. Are you ever going to get that back? No. Because once it's done, it's done.
So, and that's the thing. It's like once it's disturbed, and people don't understand that the dynamics in the marine system is so much more complex than on land. And because there's so little research done, like I guess when I studied marine science and coastal zone management, I got to understand, a lot of that, and working for the Department of Environment and Conservation and like talking to specialists in the area and having a natural interest in that myself and free diving and stuff like that. So for me, I come from a very different perspective, but trying to get through to people that aren't involved in that area whatsoever. They don't even go into the water or go to the water. They might love it and respect it, but they have no concept of what's happening. What concerns me is that people have acquiesced their powers and just gone, well, what can we do? It's like, get off your bums, like you've just said, and do something. We're in the fight of our life because we are literally fighting to save all of our coastal communities all along WA from foreign takeover. And it's like, the thing is that we're getting really crappy Chinese built blades.
Like the ones that collapsed in the typhoon?
Yeah.
Nice.
We already know that. Ours are coming from China. And they're like, oh, no, they're going to be tough. It's like, it's not. We're getting told by so many people that are part of the port system. It's like they're all coming from China. We already know that. That's what the plan is. We've been told that by people involved in government. And the thing is that we already know. So what it is that Australia was sold off as a carbon offset nation for all of these foreign countries, especially places like Denmark and China, that want to offset their carbon footprint by using us as their dumping ground for their crappy infrastructure and industries. And then we have these Ponzi schemes from Denmark and everywhere else over there that want to come here and take all hard taxpayers' dollars that in subsidies and grants, and then they will just walk away without any accountability, without having to even look at decommissioning. Like literally in one of the budgets, they said it was $1 million of decommissioning. I'm like, what a crock of, it's like, it's $500,000 for one maintenance vessel to go out for the day. And I know that because the guys that work on those boats told me it's $500,000. How can you say it's going to cost $1 million to decommission the offshore wind project just here? The other thing that's being hidden is the fact that they're now putting these wind turbines in an area where they're going to have oil and gas rigs. So they're going to try and offset the impact of oil and gas rigs with, so it's like a double whammy. So I'm like, this is, okay, this has got too crazy. It's like, it's right on our doorstep.
Yeah. And you know what? And it's kind of like, if they're saying that in China, like this is to offset China's carbon footprint.
Of course it is. It's all these nations.
That's just total bullcrap. Like last year, they built one coal plant a week. One coal plant a week. It's like,
and where does that come from?
is
It
going to
comes from
offset.
Australia.
I'm like, none of that's going to offset anything. Period.
No.
It is a Ponzi scheme. It's only to get grants. And I think, countries that are, doing this, obviously whoever is orchestrating it has their hand in the pot somehow.
Yeah.
But it's like, because it doesn't make financial sense. And I'll tell you this, the cost of your electricity from it will be out of control. There was analysis that was done. So most of the time they do what's called, at least here in the United States, the way that they measure different forms of electricity from different sources of power. They call it the levelized cost of electricity. But and they try to like include the subsidies and they include things like that. But what they don't include is the intermittency. And so offshore wind, obviously the wind doesn't always blow, right? So you have a lot of downtime. So in order to have offshore wind, even as a power source whatsoever, you still have to have the entire grid backed up by an on-demand power plant all the time, whether it's natural gas or coal or what. So you're paying two bills, really, right? But this guy who's an energy analyst, he did an analysis on New England. And he said that the cost for offshore wind in New England, when he added all the extra stuff on top of the levelized cost of electricity, all the different things, would be 12 times higher than the going rate. Now, can you pay that? And this is what it's like another like real life, like, hey guys, electric prices here anyway are going up anyway, right? So do you want to pay wind electricity, which is 12 times higher your current rate? Like, who could afford that? If your electric bill increased by that amount, like, could you pay it? I couldn't. I wouldn't be able to have electricity, right? So it's
not even that, because what it affects is it's the ongoing cost to every user, which means it's every business that's going to put that back onto the consumer. And I keep trying to get this through to people. It's like, if people tell me one more time, it's like, well, what are we going to do? It's the cost of like, advancement, and it's the cost of progress. It's like, it's not a cost of progress. We're digressing, and we're actually reducing ourselves from having a stable lifestyle where we have baseload energy, we can have heavy manufacturing and industry, to being now just consumers for other nations. That's exactly what this is lined up to be. It's not going to be that we will have our own primary production. They're trying to get rid of a lot of our food production here because they're trying to ban live export of sheep. And whether people believe in, like, that's a good thing or a bad thing, all I'm going to say is you need to educate yourself about how much the agriculture here and fishing and all of these industries are under attack by these same overarching issues. And people need to start joining the dots, because if they don't get up and fight right now, I am very concerned that by the end of this year, they're going to start installation and pile driving off our coast.
Yeah. And it sounds like it's like a lot of things and very similar to the United States. But like, do you want Australia to be the whipping post of all the other countries? Let them pay for themselves. Let them pay for their own ideas. Let them pay for their own, like, why does that have to fall on you? And a lot of Americans felt like that. Like, why does it have to fall on us? Like, why do we have to pay the cost of all of this other stuff that all these other people want to do or have or whatever? And that's how Donald Trump got elected. People were tired of it. People were tired of being the whipping post of the rest of the world, as far as, whether it was subsidies, whether it was, foreign aid, whatever it was, people were tired of it. It was like, no, that's why Donald Trump won with America first, and it's kind of, and with Australia, it should be Australia first. Like, you take care of your own people first, and then, then you take care of the rest later. But yeah, and I think like a lot of people don't understand, because the mainstream media has, of course, like lied to them, and there's been so much propaganda. Green energy is not green. It doesn't actually change anything about carbon production. And I tell people all the time, like, if you have to have a windmill, which has to have, a fossil fuel backup plant, right? So that you can run the windmill, but still have electric, which you need. The only form of energy that does not produce carbon is nuclear. If that's what you want, if your goal is to have carbon-free electricity, like if that's your goal, you have to look at, what are my goals here? What am I trying to achieve? If what you're trying to achieve is carbon-free electricity, then your only option is nuclear. The end, period.
And
And
the thing
so,
is that it was so poorly handled in Australia because we had a referendum back in 1990 and this whole nation voted against nuclear power. So
really,
that is what it is. Yeah. So the thing is that it was poorly put together, that plan, because people were not given the correct information. We weren't
hmm
told that we would have to go to a referendum again, because we do. To
right,
overturn that, we
right,
need to have
overturn that
another
one.
referendum where we're embracing that, because that's our constitution. That's under our constitution. That's
Wow,
part of what we
wow,
have to do, right?
interesting.
So, so the thing is that all of this was so poorly done, and this is
Mhm.
why I look at this nation. I think you have at least some strong leadership. We have none. We have woke agenda. We have an individual who allegedly was voted in as the prime minister. I think that that's still being investigated, and allegedly a Labor government, which is the same as the Democrats there, were voted in, but that's being investigated also. So all I
Wow.
can say is that if people cannot listen to your wisdom, if people can't take a minute to just go, if I don't get up off my backside right now and stand up for our value system, that's what it's about. Our
hmm
culture, our value system, our communities, our food security,
Yeah.
our energy security. If we don't do this now, we are just blowing in the wind, because we are ripe for the picking, and these nations will steamroll over us continually, like this government already has, to the point where our oceans and this nation will be taken over by nothing but foreigners, foreign policy, and nothing that represents who we are as a nation in Australia. And that the damage will be done, like you said, and to come back from that is near impossible.
Yeah. And something else actually that people should be aware of and really think about, because again, it's never discussed, right? And I found this out through reading about a lot of things through documents after documents. Um so like I said earlier, wind turbines interfere with every form of radar, including defense radar. And one of the things that happened recently was in December of 2024. Okay. Sweden canceled 13 offshore wind farms in the Baltic because of the threat of Russian aggression, because they said it would reduce our detection time of an incoming missile by half. We won't be able to see planes, we won't be able to see drones, and we won't be able to hear submarines. So that's like a problem. And because Russia's right over across the water, they were concerned about that, right? And so they said, no, our primary, duty is to the nation of Sweden to protect and defend it. And so they said, we have to put these other things on hold. And, I mean, if you're that close to China,
So
not great.
Chinese warships were off our coastline only a few weeks back, and our state premier said that he didn't really have a problem with it. That
Wow.
that they're allowed to go about their business and do what they've got to do without, they haven't encroached on our border system and this kind of ridiculous ranting. And our prime minister is of the same thinking. So I want to join dots for people. If we're getting infrastructure that's created by the Chinese and can
hmm
be turned off remotely, let me just say this:
Right.
it can be turned on and off remotely, and they're having their ships on our doorstep. That is of great concern. And that's not,
Yeah.
that's literally what you've said, because other nations have done this.
Yep.
This is a real, genuine concern for a lot of people here. Really. It's like, so what we're saying is that we don't have a problem with a place like China having its warships off our coastline, and that we're going to put their infrastructure in our oceans and on our land that can be turned on and off remotely.
Yeah. And they can put listening devices, they can put tracking devices on those. There can be all kinds of electric, things. And what if they want to launch some drones off those ships? And what if they want to, bring some submarines in there to do some recon, and you can't hear them and you can't see those drones, and you can't, it makes you extremely vulnerable. And, that was another one of obviously the arguments against that New York project. But, from just a defense angle alone, it's like, hey guys, like, India and Pakistan are shooting at each other. You have, Russia and the Ukraine, things aren't great. You have China and Taiwan, that's not great. You have all these tensions, and which you're always going to have, like, it's the world and people do stupid things, right? So this is what happens. This is human history. But do you want to make yourself vulnerable, for what? Like, to me, like, the question is for what? Like, if you're balancing something and you're balancing something out, like, is the risk worth the reward? Like, what are you getting
Pros
at?
and cons.
You're not getting anything. All you're doing is giving, and there's no like balance of risk versus reward. It's all risk, no reward.
No.
So why would
Absolutely.
you do that?
We can't. There's too much to risk. And this is what we say. There is too much to risk. There's been no precautionary principle. We've never had any straight answers. Not once. Even when we turned up to Canberra, not once did we get one single answer.
No.
Megan, your words of wisdom have been heard, is all I can say. They have been heard.
Well, thank you. Good luck, guys.
Thank you so much for joining me on Edge Radio today, and wish you all the best. And I'm sure we'll be chatting again. Thanks, Megan, again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.